as a Marine. Joining me now is Hal Kempfer, a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Marine intelligence officer, and host of the Strat podcast. Hal, the vice president, he also, he talked about the shutdown as well at the start of his speech. He laid blame on the Democrats for, as we now enter week 3 of this shutdown. What did you make of the speech and the message from the vice president?
Well, overall, Brooke, I thought the speech was very motivational. Of course, this is the first vice president that was ever a Marine, and that's a unique thing. In fact, in the history of presidents and vice presidents, both, he's the only Marine that's ever fell in that category. There's been other services represented, obviously, but the first Marine. So that meant a lot to every Marine out there in the audience. Yes, there was a little politics about the shutdown. He made some references there. But for the most part, he talked about things that really resonated with Marines. The E4 Mafia, I thought that comment was fantastic. And then talked about, he went through all the different command elements, which I have to tell you, hearing a lot of politicians talk about the services, I was actually impressed that he kept all of that very straight, didn't appear to look down his notes. He just knew it intuitively. So it was a very motivational speech following an incredible amphibious demonstration that was just up north of there, along the coast of Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, as he talked about the government shutdown, the vice president also thanked President Trump for signing an order recently that would help keep our military members paid throughout this shutdown. What is the feeling amongst military members right now?
Well, of course, every military member is a little nervous about this. It was very fortunate they were able to find funds to meet this recent payday. You got to remember, we have Marines, particularly junior enlisted Marines, that are literally living paycheck to paycheck, and they really do need that paycheck to hit on the right day. Now, there are some credit unions and others that have some very generous things they do to help Marines in case something like this happens, or help all service members, I should say. But it is important to make sure our service members who are serving far afield all around the world, that they get paid on those paydays, and they don't have to worry about that, because in many cases they're just not in a place where they can do something about that. That's important, and hopefully we'll see something happen in Washington, D.C.
I'm curious too, because it's not only the government shutdown, but our military members have also been dragged into the federal takeover of a lot of these major U.S. cities by the Trump administration. They've kind of, in a way, been dragged into a lot of polarizing political moments. How is that impacting morale for our military members nationwide?
Well, Brooke, obviously, having military on the streets of cities is a very polarizing topic, to say the least. Now, I've been looking at this very closely. I've been watching the orders, a little less on the political rhetoric, but looking at the orders. And these are not unprecedented things. Having federal military protecting federal property, protecting federal personnel, there's a long history of that, even after the passage of the Posse Comitatus Act in 1878. And so that is, some of these missions were kind of boring, if you will. There wasn't a lot going on, but they were not unprecedented missions. So whereas it's very, very political to even talk about it, as far as the Marines are concerned, certainly the soldiers, the National Guard troops that were federalized, I think they just salute smartly, carry out the mission, and they've been doing it very well.
You talked about some of the demonstrations we saw today as well. What else did we see and hear as part of this 250th anniversary for the Marines?
Well, what we heard was an amazing legacy across the Corps. We had a veteran of Iwo Jima, World War II. Absolutely amazing. We also saw, I think, we heard some references to some of the newer things, like the Marine Expeditionary Force Information Group. That is a new concept that really came out of information dominance, if you will, on the battlefield, and the need to move information so quickly in our modern, technologically intensive environment. He made reference to that. And then you saw the static display of so many new Marine Corps weapon systems, equipment, vehicles, everything else, along with what we saw in the demonstration. I just think it was a very impressive event. As you recall, the Army did the big parade in Washington, D.C. The Navy did their 250th down in Norfolk with all the sailors and, of course, the carrier in the background. This was the Marine Corps' way of celebrating its 250th, although I will remind everybody, November 10th is the actual birthday of the Marine Corps. And then, of course, the day after is the Marine Corps Recovery Day, or November 11th, which is National Holiday.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that as well. But you also talked about, we did see something sort of like this, maybe on a grander scale in Washington, D.C. a few months back with the Army. We're starting to see these celebrations happening across the U.S. Is this something you think we can expect to see in the years to come?
I don't know. The 250th is kind of unique. I
Sure.
mean, that's a very key number. I wouldn't expect to see the 251st to look anything like the 250th. Although there will be celebrations, and it's interesting. I don't know if it's a big change, but apparently President Trump has talked about wanting to do military parades or feature the military in parades more, which is we may see more of that, and it kind of harkens back to another age. So I don't rule that out. Although 250th is a kind of unique number, and I always keep that in mind.
Fair enough. All right, Hal Kempfer, a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Marine Intelligence Officer. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your insight on this one.
Thank you, Brooke.
All right, let's head to our top